Welcome everybody once again. I'm Trudy, the founding teacher here at InsightLA. And today is July 4th, long weekend holiday. I hope you're enjoying this holiday. It's really an interesting holiday, as I wrote about in our blog this week. And so today I want to talk about some of the meanings of freedom, of independence, in terms of our practice and inner freedom. For those of you who may be here for the first time, we're going to sit for about a half an hour, then have some teachings, and then some chance for conversation together. Oh, there's Bob. I'm glad to see you. I missed you last week. And I was going to say, it says you're Ken, but I'm glad you're Bob. So everybody, let's sit together. Just find the bell. Here it is. Yeah, let's sit together. As usual, I'll do a little bit of guided meditation and leave lots of space. I've done a lot of guided meditations, and Jack did too last week when he was with us. So a little more space today, a little more openness. Let the mind and heart be free in this meditation. So let's sit together. So beginning by taking a deep breath in and releasing. Oh, sometimes that releasing breath is so relaxing that it makes me yawn. So once again, another deep breath in. And as you breathe out, releasing any tension there may be in the body. And one more time, breathing in this moment, fully present. And breathing out, relaxing the body. And this is a simple meditation with the breath. And for any of you, for whom being aware or practicing, keeping each breath company with your attention is not relaxing, is not soothing, in fact, creates some anxiety for whatever reason, you can just tune into the sensations in the body. Noticing especially the hands. We can all do this together. The touch points, the body with the chair, the cushion, wherever you may be lying down. Just noting that sensation of touch. Alternatively, you can tune into the sounds of life around you. Sound, sensations, the breath, breathing process. These only happen in the present moment. So we bring mindful awareness to this particular moment in our whole life. Aware of sensations, aware of sounds, and aware of the movement of the breath in the body. Just allowing the breath to breathe in its own natural rhythm. And trusting that there's no good or bad breath. No good or bad way to be in meditation. Meditation is a come as you are party. Just show up exactly as you are. And welcoming the breath or the sensations or sounds that welcome us, that welcome this mind, this heart, yours and mine, into being fully present. And when the attention wanders away into the past or the future, or thinking about what's happening right now, Just gently come back to the felt experience of how it is for you. Breathing in and breathing out. And when you find yourself lost in thought, if that happens, just gently shift the body back half an inch, maybe an inch, just stepping back into this relaxed, receptive posture. If you're lying down, you can just imagine the corners of the eyes falling to the side, everything relaxing down. And notice the shift, subtle shift as you move back. Allowing each feeling, each thought, each sensation or sound, each breath to simply appear, be received, and pass away. And when you notice there's some distraction or dullness, just very kindly, very tenderly, come back to sensing and feeling this moment. Loving awareness can keep each breath company from the beginning to the middle to the end. And then noticing the slight pause in between breaths, where one breath vanishes, the next breath is born. Loving awareness can hold the entire process of aliveness, feeling the body, the breath breathing this body, the flow of thoughts and feelings in the mind and heart. This awareness is so dynamic and capable of being fully present with however it is, just as it is, moment by moment. Wonderful to sit with you on this July 4th, Independence Day. And thank you for being here. Jack was like, "Are you teaching today?" And I said, "Yes, I am. I teach every Sunday that I can." And yeah, thanks for coming and being here. You know, I wrote a blog. I don't know, again, how many of you see the weekly newsletter that comes out on Friday. There's more than one now. Newsletter, I mean. But I wrote a blog about just the whole feeling of the word holiday and how it just brings such a sense of freedom, actually. Freedom from routines, freedom from having to do the usual stuff, freedom to hang out with friends in a way that, or family, if you like to hang out with your family, and I know not everybody has a family they want to hang out with, but just a kind of freedom to do whatever we want or whatever needs to be done that we don't get to do when we're not in a holiday. And this particular holiday, I think, brings up a lot of mixed feelings. It's a kind of bittersweet holiday because as much as we talk about freedom and let freedom ring, our country wasn't founded on the principle of freedom for everybody. Now, right now, I'm talking about outer freedoms. And here at InsightLA, we're really working with inner freedom. But I'm just reminded that in terms of outer freedoms, there are still many people who are excluded from this Declaration of Independence that says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And the same thing with the French Revolution, the declarations of the rights of man and the citizen, all men. I don't know how many people worked on or signed the French Rights of Man Declaration, but there were 56 men from the 13 colonies who signed our Declaration of Independence. And, you know, we had a plantation economy. There was never any intention of letting everybody actually have equal rights, certainly not women, and certainly not enslaved people, and certainly not the indigenous populations. So I just want to, the way that I often acknowledge at some point at the beginning or the end of a practice period that we are located on unceded native lands. I'm still up at Jack's in Marin County, where the Coast Miwok tribes lived and walked this earth. And some of those folks, of course, are still here. But I read a quote, I wrote a quote by Ai Weiwei, the wonderful Chinese artist and activist, really a visionary, who had this line that just captured my imagination. He said, and this was really around I don't know how many of you may have seen years ago, there was an exhibit in Alcatraz where for months in China, Ai Weiwei worked with a model of that old prison, and he created an installation that I don't want to go into describing it all, but it was amazing, and you can look it up. That happened in the prison, and so much of his work, but particularly there, explored the themes of confinement and freedom. And this is the quote: "When you constrain freedom, freedom will take flight and land on a windowsill." I love this phrase, but I don't really know what it means. You know, it's kind of mysterious, but it's beautiful at the same time. And I like to think that freedom is sitting on the windowsill, just being present, kind of waiting for us to wake up. And I don't know, maybe freedom isn't as far away as we think. You probably have your own way of understanding the meaning of that phrase, but I loved it, and I felt like it captures the beauty of the free spirit. And today I just want to talk a little bit about the inner freedom, and that's the inner freedom means the freedom from feeling confined, imprisoned by our thoughts, by our views, our opinions, our beliefs, and our fears, and the role of mindfulness and compassion in freeing our hearts from all of that. You know, our inner freedom consists mostly in being able to be present, to not be lost in the past or future, the way the mind, that's where the mind loves to dwell, right? How was I? How will I be? Past and future. But all of you have experienced in at least moments how meditation can bring some kind of really delicious freedom from that. And not just freedom from past and future, but a temporary freedom from all our identities. You know, I'm the kind of person who, you're the kind of person who, all our identities that were created and formed by the world, you know, the world of our childhood, the world of our culture, the world of the expectations of how to be. The other night, I woke up, I don't know, it was maybe around 3:30. It was early, too early to get up, because there were coyotes that were howling. We have a sort of an influx of coyotes in this neighborhood, and there's a little wild area where they gather, and I guess that's where they sleep, and they love to sing, depending on how you feel about it. I felt they were howling and screaming that night. It was like a berserk cocktail party or something, and it woke me up. And so I began to meditate and, you know, just calm, you know, breath and peaceful, and get ready to fall back asleep. And suddenly I just thought of something I was doing the next day, but it wasn't like, oh, I have to do this, or it wasn't one of those anxious swoopers that can come in when I'm feeling peaceful. It was just a very simple thought of something the next day. And because I was so quiet and kind of in that borderline of sleep and awake, but meditating, I felt it in the body. I felt it as this kind of adrenaline. It wasn't a huge rush of adrenaline because I wasn't afraid, but I felt the contraction of that. And I felt like, you know, just imagining having to do something when you're feeling peaceful. This is enough to um, take us away from being fully present. I could be fully present with that feeling, but I also know the experience of being fully present that you all know, that we all know naturally when we're not thinking about the past or the future at certain times. Everybody's tasted this, times when you're listening to some great music or making art, or you know, times when you might just be dancing or getting absorbed in a project or playing with a child or making love or sitting with a baby with their big wide eyes, totally present, staring at you. Um, you know, these moments of freedom from the past and the future, they remind us of what's possible for us. And this is, you know, meditation teaches us how to be comfortable and alive in a new way. You know, how to be, how our minds and our hearts, the word is chitta in Pali, how our chitta, which means mind heart, can be just content in its own presence, you know, just happy in its own presence. I think this is why, if you've ever had a chance to do a meditation retreat, people love meditation retreat, because you experience this unwinding of all the complexities of our minds, a simple unwinding into a kind of contentment with just who we are. This is possible. And this is, it reminds me of, there's a Bob Marley song, the Redemption song. You might remember this song where he says, "Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds." And that's what we're doing here when we sit, you know, when we sit with all the distraction or the dullness, whatever's happening, maybe the spaciousness and clarity and happiness of just being here, the joy of being here. But we also, I will speak for myself, and I know you have this experience, can get so caught by, yeah, just feeling sometimes feeling imprisoned by the thoughts that just encapsulated in this kind of lonely thought world, right? I remember my friend Linda was getting to go to Italy on vacation. This was years ago. And she was not a meditator. And she said, "I wish I was a meditator because I can go on vacation, but I'm taking my head with me." And she said it quite ruefully. Yesterday, I was sitting and reflecting about what I wanted to share with you this morning. And I went for a walk, because sometimes I get more inspiration if I'm moving, either in the water or just going for a walk and just feeling the breeze on my skin. And I walked past the pond and I saw these, there was this flotilla of white pelicans that landed and were just gliding by. And then they started soaring and gliding and flying up and swooping down and occasionally, you know, diving and splashing, maybe catching a fish. I don't know. I couldn't see that closely. Couldn't see them that closely. But I was so touched by their freedom and ease, and they could swim and they could float and they could go this way and that way. So just so flowing. And you know, our awareness is like this. It can soar, it can dive, it can splash, it can go in so many different directions. It's our minds are actually, when we're not lost in thought, very nimble and flexible, agile. And just, you know, I mentioned in the meditation that we can span the whole body with our awareness. We can span the space around us with our awareness. You know, it's like my mom used to sing this song, and maybe I'll sing it to you. I wasn't planning to do this, but I loved this song. Okay, this is my, I can't tell jokes either because I always remember the punchline and not what leads up to it. So I remember the last two lines, which are actually relevant for what I'm talking about. Oh, here it is. I remember it. Okay. I would be a fairy if I could, fed on dew and living in the wood, 'cause fairies have a pair of magic wings. Wings are always useful things. So of course that song popped back into my mind when I was watching the pelicans. But then because I was also reflecting on teaching today, I felt, yes, this is our awareness is like these magical wings that can enfold us and really anywhere the mind can go, enfold it in loving awareness. It's dynamic, this capability of spanning, of expanding, of contracting, of softening, of balancing. We can do all of this in this intimate world of sensing and feeling, just sensing and feeling. It's a very intimate practice, this practice of mindfulness, of meditation. And we can feel the energies of life. We can feel our life force flowing through the breath. And this way, we're like all sentient creatures, right? Sometimes trembling, sometimes balanced, sometimes rushing around, sometimes, sunk in despair, sometimes sitting in the windowsill, maybe too, just poised on the windowsill. And we learn through practice, through just doing it over and over again. We learn how to meet experience more compassionately, how to stay more grounded, and and we realize in that sensing, feeling intimacy of the moment, it's not out there. There's no location for what we're searching for peace, for contentment, for love, right? There's just the intimacy of this moment. I heard Jack was on a video about the history of the Insight Meditation Society in Barre, Massachusetts. It's just a rough cut that Eddie Halban made, a friend in Boston. And he was talking about when he first met Ajahn Chah. And, he said hello, and Ajahn Chah smiled, big smile of welcome. He was just entering the monastery. Jack was, obviously. And Ajahn Chah said to him, "I hope you're not afraid to suffer." And Jack thought, wow, that's a pretty weird kind of welcome. But he was smiling reassuringly. And then he went on to say, there are actually two kinds of suffering. There's the suffering that you run away from and that follows you everywhere you go. And then there's the kind that you turn and face and feel and discover the freedom and well-being that's possible. And that's what we are here. That's why we do this together, because we can support each other to turn and face whatever is difficult and to acknowledge it in our lives. We support each other so that the gates of freedom will open, right? These Dharma gates of freedom will open when we can meet the suffering, the difficulties, excuse me, in our hearts, in our world, when we can meet them with some loving kindness, some compassion, some tenderness, a bit of equanimity, of wisdom that sees, okay, there's a lot of chaos in the world. There's a lot of confusion inside and outside. And I can meet this with some tenderness, And as I said during the guided meditation, for those of you who were here, you don't have to be right or wrong to breathe. There's no good or bad breathing. The same for hearing, the same for tasting, touching, smelling. It's just so simple. And because our minds are not simple, it's not simple to do. But we can sit simply and let all of these complexities begin to untangle and release ourselves from pressure, really. We can be like the pelicans, or at least a little more like the pelicans. I want to tell you a story about Jane Goodall. A book just came out called The Book of Hope, where she's interviewed. It's the same person, I forget his name, who wrote with the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Tutu, The Book of Joy. And so he is basically interviewing Jane Goodall, and it's called The Book of Hope. It's a book that in this season of fires and the kind of existential dread, I think, that many of us are feeling about climate change and the grief for the loss of species and those that are teetering on the edge of extinction. And I recommend this book. It's called The Book of Hope. And I think it just came out. And you may have heard this story because she tells it often. But Jane Goodall talks about when she was sent to study the chimpanzees, when Richard Leakey sent her. You know, she was young, I think a graduate student, I'm not sure, but she was young. And she was there. She was there for 6 months. And she was really in a kind of, as the time went by, you know, she climbed around, she looked for them, she couldn't find them to observe them, which was her job and why she was there. And she started to panic, you know, that her 6-month research grant and time there was going to run out, and she wouldn't have been able to even observe them properly. But what she did was she would just go and sit. She would just be present. She was doing this for months. And finally, toward the end of the time, the one named David Gray, an alpha male named David Graybeard, came and let her watch him. Looked at her, she looked back, she just sat there, and she watched him take a twig, a long twig, and insert it into an anthill, and then pull it out and yum yum, lick the ants off, and was able to do this groundbreaking paper about using tools in, you know, animals using tools in ways that hadn't really been imagined before. So I just, that's a lot of patience, but it takes a lot of patience. And each of you, we have a lot of patience to sit with ourselves day after day, whether it's 5 minutes or 50 minutes, we do this, and it takes patience. Somebody at one of the Ram Dass retreats that I was teaching a couple of years ago, a few years ago now, actually, somebody raised their hand and asked Sharon Salzberg, what do you do when you meditate? You know, this is a question people often have for teachers. What do you do when you meditate? And I loved her answer. She said, I sit down and I get real. Isn't that great? You know, and that's what we're doing. We're getting into this real world of presence. And when we're in the real world of presence, you know, we're trying not to escape from what is here into our ideas and views and plans and possibilities. And, you know, the Buddha talked about the great joy and freedom of, you know, of letting go. He called it abandoning views, you know, letting go. I really wish there could be more of that happening in our country right now. People abandoning their fixed views and positions. But whatever this present moment is like, it can be messy, it can be chaotic. And if you're just starting out being with yourself in this way, it will be messy and it will be chaotic and it will be confusing. But it can settle, and that confusion can be resolved. And we just notice where there's stress, where there's relaxation. We just notice where there's openness and sensitivity, where there's receptivity, where there's agitation, worry, judgment, self-criticisms, that constant comment of self-judgment going on. All of this is just, the thinking mind, rattling the bars of its prison, really. and the beautiful thing is that we can sit with all of this, and those bars will at least momentarily vanish, and then we forget and they come back, and then they vanish again. And it can feel really frustrating, and it can feel futile. What's the point? I'll just forget again. But the point is that we're turning towards what is most direct, what is most vivid and real, like Sharon said, what is real, what is most intimate, actually, what is most intimate. And when we do this, we discover there are really no boundaries in that sense of me and you. And again, I'm not talking about psychological boundaries that we need to set for our survival and well-being. I'm just talking about that sort of underlying feeling of separation or being somehow exiled from the heart of life. And so that when we sit and we have this kind of patience, like Jane Goodall had, the qualities that are warm, that are nurturing, that are benevolent, these are the true qualities, the natural qualities of our hearts, and they are free to come forth. And that is, as you know, many of you, that is what happens. And this is really, our great human potential that we study and practice and realize here at InsightLA. And even a little bit of sitting can actually open up this kind of freedom and free you from the thrall of past and future and being obsessed with them, and then there is that capacity to connect with where we are most alive, which is always where, right here, right now. And when we do this, those beautiful qualities of the heart arise, and a kind of natural responsiveness to the world. My first teacher used to say, and this is a Zen saying, I think, in general, when you're hungry, eat. That's simple. But then he also said, and when people around you are hungry, when those around you are hungry, feed them. When the world is hungry for truth and sustenance and solace, right? We feed each other with these teachings of how to get free and how to be present. And I just want to close this talk for this morning with a quote from a friend who was a great artist, singer of the last century. She actually is an amazing writer, an amazing painter, as well as an amazing singer. Her name is Joan Baez, and many of you will remember her from your youth. And this is from a text that she sent. And she was talking about feeling a lot of despair about climate change and the state of the world, but carrying on anyway. And this came in the context of her talking about David Attenborough and his wonderful, wonderful educational programs about nature. She says, yet in spite of the grief, I am grateful that I've had a full life on this singular and exquisite planet Earth. The depth of my sorrow is equaled by the depth of my gratitude. It's as though I've had a, excuse me, a scrape with death and come out alive. I hear the birds more intensely now. They may be fewer in number, but the song is still transcendent. Perhaps one little bird alone must now be both the diva and the chorus. I'll continue doing the things one does to be a force for good. Be kind to Mother Earth. Speak for the voiceless. Love the unlovable. Fight the growing tide of hatred. Get children out of cages. Confront racism, including my own. Prove that we nearly had an abrupt end to our democracy on January 6, 2021. She's going to be hosting the man, Michael Fanon, who was beaten and almost killed during the insurrection. She goes on, I'll also watch dumb movies, talk to trees, laugh till my belly aches, and dance wherever I find music and level ground. So this is what I wanted to share with you this morning on Independence, Interdependence Day. You know, this is really our freedom. So now it's your turn to, have some conversation. And if Caroline is kindly moderating for us today, if you have a question, you can raise your hand with the reaction button all the way to the right at the bottom of your screen. And Caroline will call on you, and then you can unmute yourself. And your question doesn't have to be about anything that I've said. It can be just about your own practice or sharing some of your own experience. Yeah, most people have their cameras off, so I can't really see you. Yes, and Caroline is reminding you that you can use the chat to put a question in the chat if you feel shy about speaking. And if you feel super shy, you can address it just to Caroline and she'll read it out loud without your name.
Robert, did you have your hand up? Yeah, you want to go? You can go ahead and share. I don't see anyone else's hand up, so feel free to unmute yourself. I think you're still muted. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
No, it's just nobody was talking and I've been wrestling with something, or not wrestling, but okay. After living in our house for almost 40 years, we just had the inside painted, and I've been confronting all sorts of things I'd hidden away. And last night I discovered a photo album of me pictures of me and all my deceased relatives now when I was 1.5. And I've just been thinking about, since I'm almost 80, I have recently been thinking about this whole trajectory. I just retired and all sorts of things are gone now. And I'm not mourning, but I'm sort of, wow, that's happened. And it's kind of interesting. And I wouldn't say I'm sad, but it's realizing that past is gone. And and the challenge never ends, I guess. So I'm not unhappy right now. I was angry before because I couldn't figure out how to get the video, etc., working. So the support people will get a semi-angry note to contemplate. But it just, I don't know, it's interesting. And
One of the things that I reflect on listening to you talk about, basically 79 vanished years. I have 75 vanished years myself. So I understand what you're talking about. But I think, what does that reflection bring in terms of your ability to appreciate the preciousness of this moment? You don't have time to be writing angry notes, Bob. You don't. You don't. Actually, none of us do, but the young ones imagine that they do. And they certainly have a lot more some days than I was swimming in the pool this morning, and a woman was talking about how someday she had planned to do something until she realized, I think she's about 53, and she realized, oh, the some days are, there are fewer of them as life moves on. So I just want to say, this kind of life review and reflection that discovering the photo album began for you, that's a beautiful process. But see if you can use it to realize, oh my goodness, this precious human birth, this life, that I was given, I don't know how much more I have of it. None of us do, but the elders, this is a more vivid realization. And maybe that can inspire you to do this practice, because it will really tenderize your heart. It already has been. You know this, you've discovered this, or you wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you. Yeah. I don't know what I said. Oh, there, good. Somebody has their hand up. Who is it? Oh, it's Katie. Good. We get to hear about your retreat.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
And it was a very, very insightful retreat. And I have a question I hope is very applicable to everybody on the meditative path. So yes, I'm still in awe and humility of what I learned on this meditative / plant medicine retreat, and coming home. And you would, I bet, Trudy, when people go on meditation retreats and come home, the integration part can be kind of a struggle with their daily life. And so I hope my question is clear. I have a local meditation guru I see once a week, and she felt like if the spiritual or meditative journey is kind of like death to rebirth or transformation. I've been told by several people I'm kind of in that desert phase where it's like I'm going across the desert. I'm kind of leaving who I was, being transformed into, maybe some people say, higher levels. I kind of feel like, I'm not going to be a saint, but just more leaving maybe who I was. And like you said, you wish the world would, dissolve their rigid ideas into maybe a more authentic person. And I guess my question is I'm really struggling kind of as a mom to a young child. And I've shared on here, I have very, very toxic home life. I'm trying to figure out how does one take the space and time if like they yearn to grow. And I'm really sad. I also couldn't get on. So I missed your talk, except when you started the very end of, what do people in prison do to find freedom? So it's kind of, I'm thankfully not in prison, but you have confinement of your daily life and yet a desire
right.
to reach prison or reach freedom. So we all have some confinement, we have freedom. So I hope to review this video once it's put up on your website. And so I guess, any advice on how to integrate it, how to still integrate it well with other not necessarily distractions, because this is the path, but other things that make it hard to come into your authentic self. I hope my question's at least clear enough.
Very clear. Yeah, it's very clear. And I want to apologize to you and Bob and anyone else who had trouble getting in. I don't know what happened, but I'm really sorry that happened.
And I'm glad
So,
it's recorded. I'm glad it's
oh
recorded.
yeah, it's recorded. It'll be posted on InsightLA's YouTube, or I guess they're posted on my website, but I think it's on InsightLA's YouTube
InsightLA.
actually, is where they're posted. And you know, your question is applicable to anybody who has had the opportunity to go on retreat and then comes home and meets the reality of home, which is so different from the sacred, protected space of retreat. I mean, everybody tastes it a little bit just coming home from a vacation. And it's like, whoop, okay, that was great. And now all the challenges. And I think it can even be aggravated by the taste of freedom that comes with retreat. Makes the feeling of confinement less. It's harder to bear because you know there's an alternative and you've tasted that, right? Yeah. So, you know, I think that caring for a young child is a time when you actually, I mean, she's a toddler, right?
Yes. And I wanted to honor her well. So it was very, it was very insightful how to best honor her journey. I don't know what path she'll take, but I want to show up well, listen. I just want to listen well to honor well.
But to do that with a toddler, you have to, well, any toddler, it requires constant attention, pretty much. Constant attention. And rather than think of that as just like this exhausting, unremitting chore or requirement, which of course it feels like at times, that is your actual meditation, because you have to be constantly present with her. So instead of being frustrated, like, whoa, I can't, how could I carve out the time? I don't have the support here to do that. To just, every time you're running around after her, picking up after her, you know, watching her to make sure she doesn't swallow this or trip on that or bang her head on the other thing, you know, that is, you're practicing mindfulness. You're practicing loving awareness. Oh, you may not feel loving all the time. Nobody does, especially with their kids, but, or any of their intimates. But you understand what I'm saying? It's a way of kind of dissolving that, a little bit of that
tension.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And I'm glad the retreat was so fulfilling for you. You know, I know that it's a great blessing to be able to do retreat.
Yes.
I'm
now I
glad
just,
you could
like
do
you
it.
said, maybe when she's napping, carve out time so it can kind of, there's some mom self integration time.
Yes.
But you're right too.
Yes.
As I lay my head on the pillow, if the house is not on fire, it's a successful day.
Exactly.
Everybody's breathing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm going to confess something to you. I became a mom very young, and I really didn't know anything much besides, you know, what I learned from my parents, but I didn't remember what I learned about taking care of, you know, a baby, particularly because I was a baby and I couldn't remember that. But I remember when my daughter was crawling, and this is speaking to every day that the house isn't on fire is a good day. I rarely had time to clean the floor, and I hated washing the floor anyway. And I remember I would have to wash her knees before I could put her in her crib because they would be so, you know, just dirty. You know, that's the kind of thing we forgive ourselves, right? We wash their knees. I learned the hard way by putting her in her crib one day and noticing her sheet was filthy afterwards. So yeah, and she does she take one nap or two?
One now.
Yeah.
Thankfully it can be long enough to sit.
Yeah.
Thankfully.
Enjoy that nap.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Robert, did you have your hand up? Or did I?
I see Sherry has her hand up, but I don't.
Okay. Robert had his up for a second before she did, so I wasn't sure. But Sherry, go ahead and share for a little.
Okay.
Unmute.
Yes. Am I unmuted?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, so Trudy, thank you. This whole morning of the meditation and the talk, it was so beautiful that it's kind of left me almost speechless, but at the same time, when you're thinking, oh, what did I say? Like, did I say something? It was so beautiful. It was like a jewel. And it just has really met my need for this moment. This week I have been struggling with a lot of the things that you talked about regarding discouragement about the earth and humanity to each other, and just sadness and disappointment, and trying to hold on to the hope at the same time. And so I feel like I want to listen to this again and like record it all on paper so I can read it anytime. But it's just so beautiful. And I want to tell you thank you for teaching on these days, these holidays, because sometimes if I don't have plans or nothing else seems intriguing, I think, well, at least I have my sitting group. Yeah, and the quote you gave us from Joan Baez is just really, really moving as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I did have my hand up and then I took it off, but I could just say quickly, loving awareness, which you have been talking about and I've incorporated. I also realize, and it likely doesn't need words to explain it, but I was wanting some words around it. And how do you describe it? And
What
it
kind of
means to
words?
you?
What kind of words do you want?
That is it is very it's very hard to grab a hold of, because it's so I want words in which I can hold on to it more.
So I think just, that whole expression of like grab a hold of it is might be part of the difficulty, because what I'm describing today is that process of like sort of stepping back into presence with what's real and allowing that quality to emerge. Now, some words that I would put around it would be words like tenderness, kindness, acceptance, in a sense, not of resignation, but of just freeing ourselves to be who we are in that any given moment. Robert, when I first started to meditate, one of the things that struck me the most was that I got to be exactly the way I was, that I could just express however I felt, not verbally, but to myself, and acknowledge it. And that, I don't think I'd ever done that. I don't think I'd ever felt free to do that. I was always trying to be the person that I thought I should be. So yeah, I think a kind of self-expression, a kind of like I have to find, rather than search for words. Do you live anywhere near any nature? Can
I
you
live in nature.
go?
I'm in Topanga.
Okay. I feel like loving awareness is actually it's there in the stillness of nature.
Mm-hmm.
And especially now when we're all, many of us are feeling sort of hyper aware of the endangered nature that we live with, just feeling like that preciousness of a bird song or of the dry oak leaves crunching into your feet, or do you know what I mean? Just like
Yeah, I guess
little,
my thing that I do that the loving awareness idea, which has helped me with it, is like when I'm crunching the leaves and
yeah,
I'm not fully able to appreciate it, is to allow me to be distracted. Like even if I'm distracted, right?
exactly.
And that is because there is that, this belief I used to have is if I wasn't happy, there was something the matter with me rather than life has, I'm happy sometimes and sometimes I'm distracted and sometimes I'm, hurt, and there's things that happen rather than I'm supposed to be something. So
Exactly that. Exactly that. That's supposed to be anything, whether it's
mhm,
happy or smart or, great, whatever it is. That's oppression. That's not
mhm,
freedom. And
mhm,
and it's happening all the time. I do it to myself sometimes. Oh, I'm supposed to be a teacher. How could I be this way or that way or think this or that? It's and the trick is just what you said, not to get caught in identifying with that. That's just another thought, and they pile on top of each other. Um, that is loving, letting yourself be as you are. And we teach also what? The truth of impermanence, that things are always changing. So to imagine that I'll always be happy or always be peaceful or always be
yeah,
loving, not possible, because I'm not always anything. Nothing is.
mhm,
Nothing is. And that's what I was trying to say to Bob. I was a little harsh when I said you don't have time to write, annoyed notes,
you don't.
but but yeah, nothing, nothing stays the same. So given that, how do we want to show up? And that's what I loved about Joan's text. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
So Margot, you want to unmute yourself?
Yes, I started mindful meditation with MBSR 3 years ago,
Great.
and I was in a toxic living situation for many years, and I suffered really until I started beginning this new awareness of meditation. And I've come a long way, and I've taken some self-compassion courses, a number of
Wonderful.
them.
Yeah.
So I've just been in a situation the past few days with a friend who's going through a great deal of stress, can't sleep at night. I offered for her to stay over to get some sleep, and I've listened to her. I've wanted to apply what I've learned in compassion, and what I've learned about my own self-care, which has been so helpful. And I've tried to do that with her, and I have, but I find myself now 2 days later pretty drained, and she still needs to uh, um, hang out and be near someone who can listen. And I don't know what I can say to her to just let it go a little bit while I restore my own energy resources. I wonder if you have any
Yeah,
suggestions.
I do. I do. I've been there where you are. And I really have. I know that feeling pretty well. And somebody said to me, which I found really helpful. I don't know if it'll be helpful to you, Margot, but somebody said to me, this is just very practical. When somebody is asking you for more than you can or want to give at a certain point, you can say, this is what I can do for now.
Mm-hmm.
Just simple. This is what I can do for now. And or this is the time that I have. And to be very clear about how much time you want to give, and then to give yourself, to be kind enough to yourself to set that limit. This is the time that I have. This is what I can do right now. You know, and if it's a dear friend, you can say, you know, I love you, but I also I really need time alone to regroup, or whatever. You don't even have to go there, but just to simple. This is what I can do.
Yes, thank you. And can you tell me the name of the book again about hope?
The Book of Hope.
The Book of Hope.
That's all it's called. Yeah.
Thank you
The
so much.
Book of
And
Hope.
I loved everything you had to offer and share this morning. It was all that I needed also to, and I thank you so much for doing this on a holiday.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. And I thank you for being here, because I couldn't do this if you weren't here. And so let's just sit for a minute together before we close. Are there going to be breakout groups today, Caroline?
Yes, so we'll come back around 2:37-ish and do some breakout rooms for further discussion for those that can stick around.
Yeah, so that's a little less than 10 minutes. So you have time to do whatever you need to do, a bio break, or if you're on Pacific time, some lunch. And I encourage you to try out a breakout room if you haven't, because it's a chance to talk with a small group about your practice and really get to know some of the people in the group. So yeah, I want to encourage you to do that. And let's just sit for a minute. So at the end of our time of studying some teachings and practicing together, we express our gratitude for this time by spreading our wings and offering the goodness of this practice to all beings everywhere, without exception. You know, all beings, the frog, the sparrow, each other. And may all beings, especially all human beings, experience the sorrow for what's happening in our world, the gratitude for being alive to do something about it in our own ways, each one of us in our own ways. May we and all beings get real together and touch the inner freedom of the heart. And I will add, touch the inner freedom of the heart as a way of freeing our own hearts, and therefore also helping to include more and more in our expanded hearts, freed from the imprisonment of our own views of various kinds, to expand our hearts. And in our own, personal declaration of independence or freedom, to include all the beings who got left out a couple hundred years ago, right? All the women, all the African Americans, all the indigenous populations, all the Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, all the Latinx, all the various genders and identities of all kinds. May we all not only be treated equal, treat each other with respect and love. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful holiday. Tomorrow's a holiday, not just today. And I hope that you enjoy it. Just enjoy it. And thank you for being here today. And I will see you next week. You can unmute yourselves and say goodbye if you want.
Thank you, Trudy.
Thank
Hi,
you.
goodbye.
Have a good week.
Everybody.
Thank
See you
you.
next
Everybody.
time.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Trudy. Have a good
Bye.
weekend.
Everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.